audience, by the way. This is one of the better, we've never had to bust down the partition to fill everybody, so this is good stuff. So this is Healthy to 100. That's the title of the talk. Real quick, by a show of hands, who even wants to live to 100? There you go. And I think most people would say, if you're not raising your hand, you would say, yeah, I want to live to 100 if. If what? If you're healthy, if you have your function, if you can drive, if you can still take care of yourself, if you still have your cognition and you're not just sitting in a chair somewhere. As long as we're healthy, then we want to live to 100. So it's really about health span. It's not lifespan. It's about not so much how many years are in our life, but how much life is in our years. And that's really the key with this. I'm using some notes because I've never done this particular talk before, but I want you to really consider, how do you want to spend your last decade? Kind of think for a second on that. Because if we look around in our family, friend group, our last decade, for most people, they call it the marginal decade. That's not usually the prettiest decade of our life. Because nobody I've ever talked to wants to end up in a nursing home. They don't want to be in a wheelchair. They don't want to have their family have to take care of them while they stare at a big tray full of pills being bathed by a stranger. Nobody wants that, right? So really, that's really the consideration. And some things I want to point out to you tonight is you get to control how you live, and you largely get to control how you die. And that's just the facts. And I think a lot of us have been told that it's just your genetics, and if you have good genes, then you've got the golden ticket, and you can ride off and do whatever you want. You've got the good genes. And if you've got the bad genes, then you're kind of screwed, right? It just doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to die early. Well, we know from the most current research that genetics really account for about 5% of our overall health and longevity. 5%. So 5% of whether you'll end up getting dementia or heart disease or cancer, 5, sometimes 10% if you're being more liberal with that number. The beautiful thing about that is that the 90% of that is under our control. It's things that we can control and things that we can do things about. So that's what tonight's about. A little bit of the State of the Union. I don't think you guys are hard-pressed to know that America's not doing very good. We have the worst what's called healthy longevity, which is how many years we live without disease. We're by far the worst. Of the top 40 nations in the country, where do you think we rank in terms of health? Some 30 what? 38? It's actually 37. Cuba is 38. So we're right ahead of Cuba, and we're slightly worse than Costa Rica when it comes to healthy longevity. We look at life expectancy. So life expectancy over recorded history has always gotten a little bit longer and longer and longer. Well, this is the first generation where that's actually going to get shorter. So the first generation ever where our kids are not going to outlive their parents. And we know that our kids are getting sicker. The rates of chronic disease in our kids, where about 50% of our kids now have what's called a chronic disease, which is something they have now that they're going to live with for the rest of their life. 34% of our kids are on what's called a chronic medication, which they're going to take the same drug now that they're going to take for the rest of their lives. Do you guys, some of the old timers in the room, do you remember what diabetes used to be called? The two types? Sugar diabetes, the sugars. A little more recent than that. There were two types. They used to call it what? Juvenile diabetes and adult onset diabetes. Well, you will notice they do not call it that anymore because we now have kids that are developing adult onset diabetes. And last year they had the first case, the youngest ever, a 3-year-old that developed type 2 diabetes. So the problem is literally skyrocketing. We take in America, we take about 75% of all the world's drugs. What percentage of the population of the world do you think we are? What'd you say? 5%. Yep, it's 5%. So we're 5% of the world's people, and we take 80% of the world's pills. And you would think if we're guzzling all those pills, we've got the best doctors, best lasers, best. You'd think if we took all that, it'd make us healthier, but in reality, it's doing the exact opposite. So a lot of this comes down to, who do you trust your health to? And some people say, you're going to trust your health to the government, AKA Medicare, by the way. The government can't even deliver mail on time. And we're going to trust our health to that broken, corrupt system. What about Big Pharma? You going to trust your health to Big Pharma? Right? Because they care about what? Money, profits, sales. That's it. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, not to their customers. Just so you know, we spend $4.5 trillion every year on health care, and every year we get sicker, and we get sicker, and we get sicker. Remember when $1 trillion used to sound like a lot of money? Yeah. Like, ooh, that's a lot. Now we're like, just Ukraine gets $1 trillion, and the border's not getting $1 trillion. Anyway, where was I? So, really, in reality, we don't really have a healthcare system. I think you guys are pretty aware of that. We have a sick care emergency crisis system that really does nothing to promote true health. Because really, the sick care system, it works a lot like the fire department. So we have a fire department that's great for emergencies, and they have two main tools. Do you know what the two main tools of the fire department are? Saw and axe. Saw and an axe, and a water hose. So we'll say axes and water hoses. That's drugs and surgery, right? So the crisis emergency healthcare sick care system has drugs and surgery. Now, if you have a fire in your house, who are you going to call? Hopefully, right? You're going to call them, and they're going to come in, they're going to kick down your front door, they're going to bash out your windows and spray down your furniture and your belongings. And if you call them on time and they do a good job, can they save the life of your house? Yes. And should we be grateful for that service? Eternally. The question is, what's left when they're gone? It's a mess. And how much sense would it make to call the fire department back the next day to clean the house, repair the house, get it back into working order, prevent future fires by getting the house so healthy and robust? Or would you need a different contractor with a different set of skills, with different tools to get your healthy house back into working order? And therein lies the problem. We're using the emergency system, which is phenomenal. Praise God. Thank the Lord. If you have a stroke, don't come to my office. Like, I don't need you. I don't want to see you. You don't need me. Right? If your artery is gushing blood, don't bleed on my carpet. Right? Go to the emergency system. But for chronic disease, lifestyle disease, things that we accumulate over time, that system, I don't want to say worthless, in most cases does more harm than good. And that's truly just the facts. The reality is we're digging our graves with our forks, largely, and we're burying our body with fast food wrappers. It's a lifestyle-driven problem. We have to have a lifestyle-driven solution. So, who's responsible for your health? We are. So then who has to be the expert when it comes to your health? We do. We do. You guys like that? I don't like that at all. I would love just to live in a world where we can trust the doctor, trust the science, right? Sadly, the science follows the money. So if you're trusting the science, you're following whatever the money is funneled into, right? So we can't. We have to be responsible for our health because it's our health, our future, our children. And we have a real crisis on our hands. And it's not the crisis that they're talking about. It's not global warming. I mean, who really cares if the temperature of the Earth's surface is 2 degrees hotter, if everybody on the Earth's surface is so fat, sick, and riddled with chronic disease that they can't even enjoy life on this planet? That's really the real problem. And the reason we do this, the reason I started doing these kind of dinners, and some of you guys know, anybody know my wife's story? Okay, some people do, some don't. So my wife, my beautiful wife, Ashley, 16 years ago we had my daughter. So my daughter now is 16, and I've also got a 2-year-old. So I'm teaching one to drive and one to not drown. That's what I always say. But right after we had my daughter, we got pregnant again shortly after. And from the get-go, the pregnancy was just bad. She was sick. She was bleeding. She had a subchorionic hemorrhage. So we went into preterm labor 3 different times. And on the 3rd time, we were not able to stop it. So our daughter would have been 15 last week. We lost our daughter in the second half of that pregnancy. And pretty well from that moment, for the next almost 2.5 years, my wife was completely bedridden. And I say completely. She could get in the car. She never drove her car, but we never went out to eat. We never went to dinners. We didn't go to church, movies, vacations, nothing. So I can tell you, in that period of time, how much do you think I cared about the vacation we were going to go on? Because we weren't, or the watch I was wearing, or the shoes, or what the Kardashians were doing lately on the news. We didn't care about any of that stuff. What's the one and only thing that we cared about? Her health. Right. And your health is, I can't overstate this, it's your most valuable possession by a mile. If you lose your health, you lose everything. You know what the number one cause of bankruptcy is in the United States? Medical bills. 63% of all bankruptcies are caused by medical bills. And most of those people, more than half of those people, had adequate medical benefits. They were covered. They had Blue Cross, they had Medicare, and they still filed bankruptcy because they didn't have enough to cover their medical bills. So this is a real literal crisis. And I'll talk through some of the things that we did with my wife to kind of get her health back. But really the choice is, do you want to go here or do you want to be here? Cruise ship or nursing home? That's the choice. Which one's more expensive, by the way, a cruise ship or a nursing home? You bet you can live the rest of your life on an all-expense, all-inclusive cruise ship, and it's cheaper than living in a nursing home. I remember my grandfather, he played professional football, big, tall, big, burly guy, and I remember he used to say, if I ever get in that kind of situation right there, just take me out back and shoot me. And we'd all laugh, ha ha, that's so funny. Or put a pillow over my head, right? But that's not how it played out. He spent about 5 years, three of those years, my dad had to go to his nursing home. Actually, one of the three, because he kept getting kicked out. But he would drive every single day to the nursing home. He was running around naked, terrorizing the nursing staff, and that's how he went out. Do you think in a million years he would have wanted that for him? And I'm not saying that every case of every condition and every possibility is 100% preventable. This is not our home. This is not our heavenly body. This will break down. The problem is we have a large role to play in what our future looks like. And that's what I want you to be encouraged by. So we're going to talk about the three, we call it the triad of health. So it's the three key systems that you have to optimize, keep healthy, work to improve in order for you to have a long, healthy, fruitful life. And this is very much like a three-legged stool. So if you miss one leg, that stool is going to collapse. And they all play off of each other. Because with gut health, if your gut's not working right, then that's going to affect your hormones and your metabolism. If your metabolism is not working right, that's going to put a toll on your nervous system. If your nervous system, so that there's so much interplay with all three of these factors, and these are the three that we're going to talk through today. You with me? All right. So first thing I want to talk about is the human nervous system. Where does the best doctor in the world live? Say Cool Springs, right across the street. Where's the best doctor in the world live? In heaven. Great answer. On this side of heaven, where does the best doctor live? It's inside you. You've got the best doctor on the planet living inside of you right now. You've got a body that is self-healing, self-maintaining, self-regulating, self-repairing. If you cut your finger with a paper cut, what happens a few days later? It heals. Sometimes or always? Always. Anyone ever had a paper cut that never healed? You're in bad shape, right? And you don't have to put Neosporin on it. You don't have to put a Band-Aid on it. You don't have to pray over it. You cut your finger, it's going to heal. 100% predictably, it's just the way it is. Sprain your ankle, which I tore the plantar fascia in my foot playing basketball 2 weeks ago. And I know I'm not too old to play basketball. I don't want to hear you say it. I don't want to hear it. Leave me alone. But I didn't do anything to it. I just kind of hobbled around a little bit. They said, put a boot on it. You need to get an MRI, and you might need cortisone. I was like, forget that. My body can heal itself. I just need to get the heck out of the way and let it do its thing. If you get a cold, does your body heal itself? Yes. If you get COVID, does it heal itself? Yes. 99.98% of the time, if you're under the age of 80, I think the numbers are, right? So your body's designed to heal. And where does that, do you guys know what organ in the body controls all health and all healing and all function? Pituitary. That's a good guess. It's the brain. And pituitary is in the brain. A lot of people say your heart, and your heart's important, but your heart doesn't control itself. There's something that tells your heart what to do. So your brain is actually the master control system of the body. All the healing power that God put in our body to be healthy and heal cuts and sprained ankles is actually inside of our brain. And the way that our body works is your brain is making biochemical electricity. You're an electrical factory, and your body's making electricity, sending it down your spinal cord and out the nerves into every organ, cell, and tissue of your body. That's just the way you're designed. Anatomy and physiology, health happens no other way. If I was to, let's say, because the nerve at the top of the neck go basically if you put your pinky behind your ear, that part of your spinal cord controls everything that you don't have to think about consciously. Breathing, heart rate, digestion, respiration, all of that's controlled by the top of your brainstem. You guys remember Christopher Reeve? The real Superman? Not this fake guy they have now. But the real Superman, remember how he got injured? Horse. He's on a horse, right? His hands kind of got tangled behind him, and he chin planted. His chin was the first thing to hit the dirt. He kind of did that little number. Do you remember what it did to his body? Paralyzed. And he had to have a respirator to keep his lungs breathing. He had to have a pacemaker to keep his heart beating. They had to manually push on his bowels to keep his bowels moving. His immune system shut down, his hair fell out, and he died at about 9 years. Now, his injury, I always thought that it cut his spinal cord, like it severed it. Untrue. It actually shifted, the top bone burst, and one of the bone fragments bruised the top of his spinal cord. You could have taken your pinky and you could have covered up that entire injury that he sustained, but it completely obliterated his health. And that's an extreme example, but that's an example of how the brain is talking to the body at all times. So if you look at the side view of the neck should have a forward curve, way more pronounced than most of you guys have. I've seen your x-rays. But it should have a forward curve like the letter C. And that does several things. Number one, it creates a shock absorber. So your big old bowling ball of a head has like a shock absorber. So every time you walk and bounce on the tractor, it can control that. And within that curve is where your spinal cord rests. Hold your hand like this, like the letter C. That mushy part of your hand is your spinal cord. The reason I do this is because there's a neurosurgeon that got up in front of a bunch of other neurosurgeons, and he had them all stand up or had them put their hand up and do this, and makes me feel smarter when I do it. But that mushy part of your hand is your spinal cord. So when you have a nice curve, your spinal cord's nice and loose. What happens when you lose your curve? Tightens, stretches, about 2.5 inches of lengthening of your spinal cord when you lose your curve. And then some of you guys, your curve is going the opposite direction, so it's literally tractioning the spinal cord, shutting down the outer part, the spinal thalamic tract on the outside of the spinal cord, and it shuts down pain receptors. The outer part of the cord is where the pain sensors come from. So that's why when people come in, they say, I show them their x-ray, they're like, yeah, but I feel fine. Well, of course you feel fine because the outer part of your cord detects pain. You can't feel it, it's shut down, right? So the top part of the neck, everything brainstem. We go a little bit lower. Those are the nerves that go to the sinuses, eyes, ears, nose, and throat. A little bit lower, we go to the thyroid. A little lower than that, it goes to the heart and the lungs. Lower than that, you get to the digestive organs. Lower down is reproductive, bowels, bladder, prostate, ovaries. And then also goes to the corresponding muscles that you see on that picture there. So it's essentially, we say your spine is your lifeline. It's really the information superhighway between your brain and your body. If I was to cut the nerve to your heart, what would happen to your heart?
Stop beating.
Stop beating. Is that a belief or a fact? Any volunteers? If you cut the nerve to your heart, or multiple nerves controlling your heart would stop. But instead of cutting the nerve, let's say you had a car wreck when you were 16, or you fell off of a horse, or you played football as a kid, or you're a gymnast, or you're whatever, and that the top part of your back, lower part of your neck is misaligned. Instead of pinching the nerve, now it's putting a little bit of pressure on the nerve. So if I cut the nerve, the heart dies. If I pinch the nerve, the heart does what? Slows down, dies slowly. Doesn't get the information from the brain telling it how to function. Right? So that's just the chemical, electrical way that our body works. So that condition's called subluxation. So when you guys come in and you get adjusted, I'm not adjusting you for your back pain or your neck pain or your headaches or your hemorrhoids. The reason we're adjusting you is to keep that circuit breaker free so that the brain can communicate freely with the body. And it takes about the weight of a dime. You ever held a dime in your hand? That much weight on the nerve causes about 60% loss of function. Dr. Chung Ha Soo from the University of Colorado in 2004 did a study with rats. They put little weights on their nerves, and they found the weight of a dime caused that blockage of electrical impulses by about 60%. So if that's happening to your kid, when do you want to know about it? Now, or when they have pain in their 30s, when they're having headaches and shoulder pain and their hands are going numb? And that's the thing with this too. Only 6% of your nervous system detects pain. It's a tiny piece of the puzzle. Most of the nervous system is controlling how you're functioning and how you're working. So for most of you guys who are already chiropractic patients, I just wanted to kind of reiterate sort of the importance of what you're doing and why you're here. It's a lot like your circuit breaker. So your spinal column, very much like the circuit breaker in your house. So you have power distributed from the road, goes to the circuit breaker, then it gets distributed to all the kitchen and the bedroom and the basement and everything else. So when stress overrides the system, we will blow a fuse, i.e. the spine will misalign. In order to save the house, the spine will misalign to lock into a defensive posture to protect the rest of the system. So when you guys come in, we're basically just throwing the fuse. We're flipping the breaker. But what happens if you stay in that stressful lifestyle? It's going to keep happening again, and then again, and again, and again. So a lot of what we're talking about is we're wanting to reduce that influx of stress so that we don't have to keep seeing you over and over with the same exact problems. You with me? Cool. So the nervous system is the first one. The next one is our gut health. So when I talk about the gut, you guys heard about gut health? That's kind of a buzzword these days. A lot of people talk about that. Everybody say, well, I poop twice a day, so I'm fine, right? It's not really just the lower colon. We're talking about all the organs of digestion, the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, and it's essentially the second nervous system in the body. Has anyone ever heard that before? They're considering it the second nervous system because it communicates to the brain, it talks to your microbiome, it does the body blows me away at how unbelievable it is. You can eat a McDonald's cheeseburger and French fries and a McFlurry, and it will turn that garbage into a liver cell or a pancreatic cell or to a skin cell. I mean, it completely blows me away. The more I learn about the body, the more blown away I am. But that's the job of the digestive system, to communicate with the brain and to process your food. So most people in America, and I would have you do it if you guys got your phone, what percentage of Americans have leaky gut? If you do a quick Google search, it's 80 to 90%. 80 to 90% of Americans have a thing called leaky gut, or also called intestinal permeability. That's the more scientific version of that. Now, the best way to explain that is your gut lining is one cell layer thick. It's just one little flimsy layer of cells that separates the stuff that's in your stomach from the rest of your body, from the external environment. So that little single layer of cells is almost like a screen door in the house. You got a screen door in the house, leave the doors open, it's nice outside, you just have the screen door. What's the job of the screen door? Keep the bugs out, let the air in, kind of creates a little barrier from the outside to the inside. Well, with most of us, we eat the bad foods, we are exposed to the bad toxins, we do all the things wrong with our bodies and our health, and it creates like a kid throws a baseball through that screen door. And what that does, it allows our food to pass through into our bloodstream and trigger the immune system to attack itself. That's why you see autoimmunity, and you see problems with even dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, because the leaky gut is keeping the food from being presented as a foreign body, and then your body's attacking itself as if you're being invaded. So most people's immune system is just running full bore 24/7, 365 days a year. So one of the keys to health is we have to repair the leaky gut. Now, the things that can really injure our leaky gut are primarily foods, and we call it GPS. It's from the GPS category. If you ever heard me talk, I say this in almost every single time I give a talk. It's you got to turn off your GPS, because your GPS, if you're eating the G and the P and the S, your GPS is set for obesity and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and autoimmune disorders and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and ADHD and autism. Everything that we can imagine is driven by that process. So what do you guys think the G stands for? Grains. Great. Grains is a tricky one because that's bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, pastries, oatmeal, cakes, cookies, and even corn, processed corn. I know, half of you want to get up and leave. Go ahead. I get it. Like, it's depressing because that's basically the entire American diet, right? Everything we get from a box or a bag or a can. If you eat your dinner from a bag, if you get your dinner from a bag handed to you from a window, it's got that in there, right? It's the G is the grain category. And the reason those are so bad is because they contain gluten, and most gluten in the country has been sprayed with Roundup, which is glyphosate. I don't know if you guys have heard of that little buzzword. Monsanto is an evil, satanic corporation who has monopolized our food supply. Monsanto, what they will do is they'll they'll set up shop next to a local farmer, a guy that's been around for generations, and they'll spray their seeds into his yard. And then what they'll do is they'll get him for copyright infringement of using his seeds to produce his crops. Put them out of business, move to the next, move to the next, move to the next. So they've monopolized the entire processed food industry. So gluten is a biggie. That's the sticky protein that our bodies cannot digest. And people say, well, Jesus broke bread and ate it. Like, how could bread be bad if Jesus ate it, right? You guys, correct. In the 1960s, they did this hybridization. Remember the song, Amber Waves of Grain? Don't make me sing, please. Those big 6-foot tall, blowing in the wind crop. Well, now it's this 18-inch GMO, hybridized, high-yield garbage that we put in all of our stuff. So it's not even the same species of product. So G is the big one, the grains. And the other thing with that is it triggers inflammation. A, by permeating the gut and triggering the immune system, but it also breaks down very quickly to sugar. Like, think about this. If you eat a piece of bread, how quickly does it turn to mush? Immediate, before it gets to like here. It's already turned into mush. That mush is sugar. So the amylase in your saliva has broken that starchy carbohydrate into a simple sugar before it ever even passes into your stomach. And you guys heard of the glycemic index? Heard of that before? What turns to sugar quicker? A piece of whole wheat bread or a Snickers bar? Whole wheat bread. Whole wheat bread turns to sugar quicker than a Snickers bar turns to sugar. Here's another one. What turns to sugar quicker? A piece of white bread or table sugar? White bread turns to sugar quicker than sugar turns to sugar. Look it up. I promise you. That's on the glycemic index. So if you're going to eat bread or pasta, or if you're going to eat a bagel or a muffin, just basically get a big old scoop of sugar and just dump it down your throat, drink a Mountain Dew, whatever you want to do. It's essentially the same thing biochemically. And that's what kills me about all these nutritionists that say it's just calories in, calories out. It's all about energy conservation, and it doesn't matter. Tell me this. Does 100 calories, or say 1,000 calories of broccoli, is that the same as 1,000 calories of Mountain Dew? No. I mean, a kindergartner knows that. What it does to your metabolism and to your hormones and to your inflammatory markers, everything changes. So it's the quality of the food that really, really matters. So that's G. P stands for processed, primarily because we know like Twinkies and donuts are no good. That's processed. But it's really the processed seed oils. So your cottonseed oil and your sunflower oil and your canola oil. You guys know where canola oil comes from? You ever seen a canola plant? There's a picture of one on the little bottle. Makes it look like it came from a plant. It don't. It stands for Canadian Oil Low Acid. So it's an acronym for genetically modified rapeseed oil, which sounds fantastic. Genetically modified rapeseed oil. It's highly GMO, it's highly rancid. By the time it reaches the Kroger shelf, it's already totally, completely rancid. But who says we're supposed to use that stuff?
The FDA.
Yeah, and the Food Drug Administration, you're right. Or the CDC, the Centers for Deception and Corruption, is that right?
Yeah.
Or is it deceit and cronyism? Can't remember.
Yes,
one of those. It's the American Heart Association. So the American Heart Association says you're supposed to use canola oil. And what's heart disease caused by? It starts with an I. It's called inflammation. So the number one driver, the underlying cause of heart disease and high cholesterol and stroke and cardiovascular symptoms and bad lipid panels and low HDL, high LDL, the number one cause of that is a thing called inflammation. So they're putting their stamp of approval on a product that causes the disease that they're trying to get rid of. You know how they pull that off? You can put that stamp of approval from the American Heart Association, you can put that on any, it's on Nutrigrain bars, Nutrigrain, which causes inflammation, right? So it's all just, you've got to be aware of this stuff because these products, it's all just slick sales and marketing. They care about their bottom line, they do not care about you and your family. And then, so that's G is what?
Grains.
P is? Processed, and what's the S? Nope, strawberries. That's sugar. I'm kidding. Yeah, sugar. like good old-fashioned sugar. We consume 100 times more sugar than we did 100 years ago. 100 times more sugar than we did 100 years ago. Because when we were hunter-gatherers, because we're essentially still hunter-gatherers, by the way. That's how we're designed, and that's how our genetics are evolved. But we neither hunt nor gather. We shop online and we use DoorDash, right? So we don't hunt or never gather. But how did we get sugar back in the day? Yeah, honey. Honey was the main source, and sugar came later. But honey, like you had to climb a tree, you had to fight off like deadly bees to get like a little bit of honey. Maybe a raspberry would grow occasionally at certain times of the year, but sugar was almost completely unavailable until a couple 300 years ago. It's almost impossible to get. And high fructose corn syrup is another biggie you gotta watch, because it completely hijacks the metabolism, and it's the highest concentration per ounce of a thing called mercury. Bet you didn't know that. That's the number one. It's actually number two. There's something beyond high fructose corn syrup that has more mercury. Guess what that is? Also another health product. Fish, yeah, but most people don't eat a lot of fish. But consumption-wise, the flu shot. The trivalent flu shot that your doctor says you have to get in order to be healthy has 35 micrograms of mercury per injection. That's more than a 550-pound man should ever be exposed to according to the EPA standards. And that's through ingestion or inhalation or consumption, not through injection. So you're bypassing the immune system, and it has a major affinity for the brain. Take vitamin D, get adjusted, cut out sugar, get some sunshine. Like, there's so many better ways, and you're going to get flooded with that come fall. You wait. In September, that flu shot marketing is going to hit you hard and heavy. They're going to do a combo shot with the 19 different spike protein COVID strains so they can just dose you up and send you on your way. It's almost an outright evil attempt to make people sicker and fatter and better customers. Because guess where the money is in healthcare? There's no money in healthy people. None. And there's no money in dead people. Where's the money? Sick people. Sick people who are suffering, who need medications, who need multiple doctor's visits, and who see themselves as a victim. That's where the money's at in the healthcare system. So GPS. So some benefits when we heal the gut, we get better moods, hormone balance. I can't tell you the number of people who've dealt with depression. We just said, cut out GPS. Depression magically goes away. And they've been on Cymbalta, they've been on Zoloft, they've been on all this garbage which triggers rates of suicide. And not to say that those drugs do no good ever. Like, if you're suicidal, you're standing on the edge of the building, like, maybe we need something to calm you down for a bit. But when you get put on an antidepressant, when do they tell you to stop taking it? Never. Blood pressure drug, when do they tell you to stop taking that? Cholesterol, when do they tell you to stop? All those drugs, you take them and you take them and you take them until you die. By the way, too, with antidepressants, I could spend an hour on that. They work no better than placebo. Doesn't mean they don't work. It just means they don't work any better than doing nothing. They work largely because you're telling the person, you take this pill, this is going to help you with your anxiety or your depression, by and large. Now, there are some clinical uses for certain, I'm not saying it's across the board everybody, but the emperor's not wearing any clothes. Hormone balance, reduced pain and inflammation, stronger immune system, better energy, less food sensitivities, enhanced resilience to stress, less anxiety, clearer skin, reduced allergies, lower risk of disease, cognitive function, and improved absorption of critical nutrients. Imagine for a second if let's say we took a monkey out of the jungle. You just plucked him out of the Congo and you stuck him in Cool Springs, and you give him a desk job, and you give him a boss and a cell phone and Netflix, and you give him a donut and a coffee for breakfast, and he eats a Big Mac for lunch, and he eats a big old bowl of pasta for dinner. He never exercises. He just kind of sits around and just sort of, what happens to the health of that monkey? Does it get better or worse? How many times out of 100?
100.
Every time. And what's the solution for that?
Put him back in the jungle.
Right. Not devise the right cocktail of drugs and pills and take this in the morning, take this, like medicate him to death while he slowly inches toward his early demise? Or is it to get him back to the way he's truly designed? to eat, move, and think in the ways that he is designed to live. And I'm not saying we put on a loincloth and go live in a cave, but we got to move in the direction of eating and moving and thinking in ways that are congruent with the way that we're designed. Metabolic flexibility. Anyone ever heard that term? That's a big one these days. So what exactly is that? So 88% of Americans, or let me say it this way, only 12% of Americans have healthy metabolic function. 12%, 1 out of 10 people basically has a healthy metabolic function, which is basically the way your body is designed to use fuel. So when you can use fuel effectively, then your metabolism is healthy. So there's two things. Your body's designed to either use glucose or sugar, or it's also designed to use fat for fuel. You're either a sugar burner, or you're a fat burner, or you're metabolically flexible so that you can do either or. That's the trick. The problem is most people in America, they have their gas pedal pegged towards sugar burning only. They can only use carbs and sugar and starches. That's their only primary fuel source that the body is capable of using for fuel. Because your body wants to live. Above all else, it wants to stay alive. So it's going to do what it can with the fuel that you give it. Now, the common traits of someone who's a sugar burner is they have problems with sleep. Their hormones are a mess. They have cravings. They get what's called hangry. You ever heard that before? Hangry, they get like 3 hours without a meal. They start tearing wallpaper down off the walls. Yeah, that's called hangry. That's because your body is running out of fuel and it's freaking out because it doesn't know how to use that 10-year supply of fuel that you have wrapped around your belly, and it can't do anything with it, so it just starts freaking out. Your blood sugar plummets, and those people get tired and headachy and sour altogether, right? So that's the sugar burner. The metabolically flexible person is someone who can go an entire day with no food. And their body's so efficient, it can switch to that alternative fuel source and everything is all fine. It's like having rocket fuel versus diesel engine, worse French fry oil versus rocket fuel. That's really the difference in those two things. Because you think about it, when we were hunter-gatherers, which we still are, by the way, and we're wild animals living in captivity. Did you know that? We are still wild animals living in captivity. It used to really crack me up in school because we would do animal biology in one building where you would study like animals, rabbits, cut them up, and we'd have to go to a completely separate building to do the cadaver studies where we cut up the human beings. It's like we've completely removed ourselves. We're animals. You guys seen that little poster or that picture of like the dogs sitting around the poker table smoking cigars, drinking whiskey? Like we can laugh at that, like that's crazy, right? But how much more insane is that for us to do that? We're animals just like they are, breathing that horrible carpet and smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. And we see it with our kids more than anything. With our kids, it's even worse. I hear it all the time. No, Timmy, don't give that soda and chips to the dog. That's for you and your friends, right? To the point that we can laugh about it, and we do, and it's murdering children. Sorry. And my kids aren't perfect. We don't give them 100% organic grass-fed all the time, but we got to be aware of what we're doing to our bodies. So the biggest thing with this is that it sensitizes a hormone. Do you know what your master hormone is in your body? Probably the most important hormone in your body. Can you guys guess what that might be?
Vitamin D.
What's that?
Vitamin D.
That's a great one. Now that's a precursor. She said vitamin D. That's a beautiful, that your body requires vitamin D, adequate amounts of vitamin D, in order to produce all of your other hormones. So if you're vitamin D deficient, it's in and of itself, it's a pro hormone. It's not a hormone itself, but it's the precursor for all the other ones. You know what the most important single hormone is? And if you're diabetic, you know all about this one. Insulin. Insulin is considered your master hormone because all of your other hormones, your progesterone, your thyroid stimulating hormone, your testosterone, all of those other numbers are affected downstream by your body's ability to utilize insulin. And the less insulin you need, the healthier you are. Anyone ever had an A1C done? That's considered a 90-day average of your insulin consumption. Anyone ever had a fasting insulin drawn? You have? You went to a good doctor.
I asked for it.
Oh, you went to a bad doctor, but you crowbarred your way into good health care.
Yeah.
Great. See, that's the sad
I
part.
didn't even know how to coated.
Oh, geez.
I had to call somebody in the hallway, and she's like, what do I put this in as?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. But I got it done.
You got it done. And that's because you are a go-getter and you will fight for your health. Anyone else have fasting insulin drawn? Like routinely. Like you go in for your blood work, they did it, great, then you've got a good doctor. They draw your vitamin D while you're in there? Good. Who's ever been to the doctor and had to ask for their vitamin D to get checked? Unbelievable to me. That is kindergarten knowledge. Like your vitamin D level and how important that is to your health. You realize if you get your vitamin D level to about 65, you cut your rate of breast cancer by about 40%. Colorectal cancer goes down about 36%. Alzheimer's and dementia, type 2 diabetes, almost every chronic disease gets better when vitamin D gets higher. COVID, you ever heard that? That South Korean study that they completely just washed out of they had 0 deaths in people with adequate vitamin D levels. None. We could have ended this whole pandemic in the first 30 days. Just pass out vitamin D to everybody, supercharge their levels up to about 60, 70, or 80, and we would have but guess what? You can't patent vitamin D because it's a naturally occurring substance. You can't patent vitamin C, you can't patent vitamin D, you can't patent any kind of vitamin because it's found in nature. So guess what they don't study? Things that they can't make money on, right? It's really literally insane. Where was I going with that? I digress. So insulin, you got to get your insulin levels into a healthy range, and a lot of that comes from changing the fuel that you're eating. The other key with that is inflammation, because we know what diseases are linked to inflammation. Just name a disease. Cancer. Cancer is highly inflammatory. And cancer, I'm glad you brought that up. Cancer is what's called an obligate glucose metabolizer, which means it's only able to use sugar for fuel. Cancer can't use fat or ketones for fuel. Cannot. It has about 8 different receptors for sugar, and I'm going to prove this to you in about 10 seconds. So, you guys know someone that's had cancer? Do you know what a PET scan is? Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, they inject you with what? Dye, which is attached to, it's a radiographic dye that's attached to a sugar molecule. So they inject you with sugar, and they wait about 40 minutes, and they scan you because they want to see where all the sugar's collecting, because the cancer loves the sugar. So it will gobble up the sugar, and that's where that tumor, that's where that dye will collect, so they can identify where your tumor is. So your oncologist, your medical, they all know that sugar causes cancer, but guess how much they talk about that? 0. There's a great book by Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He does the metabolic cause of cancer. If you want to get real deep dive into this stuff, this guy look him up on YouTube. He's pretty awesome. Yeah, so how do we do this? How do we switch this? The trick is we have to starve our body of the sugar, the fuel that's primarily designed to use for at least a period of time. And really the best way to do that I found, and this doesn't work for every single person, is a thing called intermittent fasting. You guys ever done intermittent fasting? Give me an amen for intermittent fasting. It's privileged starvation is what I call it. That's a joke, by the way. Yeah, so intermittent fasting. So the easiest way, you can do it 7 different ways, but the best way that I found is to condense your eating into an 8-hour window. So once you start eating, the clock is ticking for 8 hours, and then you're done. Does that make sense? And as you get better at this, you want to condense it to like a 6-hour window. But you got to make sure you're getting plenty of protein, because most people will eat those 2 little dinky meals, and they're getting like 40 grams of protein for an entire day. Most people, especially over the age of 50, everybody over 50 needs to get 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. You with me? So if you're 200 pounds, you need 160 grams of protein every day. That's a lot. Way more than most people are consuming. But the problem is you have to cut down on the starches and the sugars. So intermittent fasting, what I do is I eat my first meal usually around 1 o'clock. That's kind of my breakfast. And by the way, break fast. You're breaking your fast with breakfast. That's my first meal. And then I'll do like a chicken, beef, eggs, salad. Like I'll do a high protein, moderate fat, very low carb meal for my first meal of the day. And that keeps me into moderate therapeutic ketosis. And then later in the day when we do dinner, I'll do like a meat and veggie or a steak and salad or a broccoli and spinach and chicken, just meat and veggies and a little bit of fruit. And then for dinner, I'll have chocolate and ice cream. Nobody wants to know how.
You really do that?
There's a caveat to it. I mean, it's dark chocolate, so we get that like 60% and above. And then I'll make like my smoothie with protein and berries and stevia and cinnamon and a little bit of spinach sometimes, but I don't really love spinach. And I'll blend that up, and then I'll get it real cold and frozen, and I'll eat it with a spoon like ice cream. So every night, I'm eating chocolate and ice cream. And then occasionally, once you're metabolically flexible, this is the key, is you can have a birthday cake, and you can have a glass of wine one time with dinner, and you can cheat here and there, and you can do whatever. Like, you give yourself the ability to kind of get off track and get right back on track. But the problem is, I mean, most of us, like, you get a vacation meal, is what I'm saying. Problem is, most of you guys have been on vacation since Reagan was in office, so it's time to button it up, kind of reel it in a little bit, and kind of dial it in. But I promise you, if you can implement that, it'll make all the difference in the world. So,
How about if you did it, like I'm a breakfast guy, you did breakfast and a late lunch?
Great.
That'd work.
Great. I like the morning because I work out in the morning, and then that gives me like the next, 6-7 hours, whatever the math is, from 5 a.m. to 1, where I'm basically in ketosis, and the whole time, because I just revved up my metabolism with the workout, and now my body's using fat for fuel that whole time. And I don't even get hungry. Like, when I go eat, it's just because it's like time to eat. I'm not super hungry because your body's using ketones for fuel, and it doesn't have to get into your blood sugar, and it's just a much cleaner, much easier way to do it. So any questions on that before we move on? Cool. We can do some questions afterwards too. So those are the three. And then your hormones, like we talked about, all dovetail off your metabolism. So some warning signs. These are signs that your body is not doing well. You have things like allergies, which are terrible for most Tennesseans. Do you guys know, so when you are exposed to pollen, your body makes a little chemical in response to that pollen. Do you know what that's called? Histamine. And if you make the perfect amount of histamine, the right amount for your body, then you have no symptoms, no watery eyes, no congestion. You feel just fine. You never even knew that it hit you. But if you make too much histamine, then you have to take what? An antihistamine, right? So your body's allowed and able to do, as long as underneath your gut is healthy and your metabolism is healthy and your nervous system's working right, then you're not going to over-respond to the pollen, the ragweed, the dust, or the kitty cat, or the whatever, because those things are called what? Life. Like, you're not going to get it. It's not the pollen, because if everybody was having problems with pollen, we'd all have the same symptoms. Some do, some don't. So it's not the environment, it's our body's reaction to the environment. Headaches, those are easy. We see those all day long. Menstrual irregularity, we have a crisis of fertility in this country. Fertility is plummeting. Plus we have all these little man boys that don't even know how to ask a girl out on a date anyways. So like the species is in real big trouble, in my opinion. High blood pressure, cholesterol, depression, insomnia, sciatica, low back pain, carpal tunnel, neck and back and joint pain, dizziness, fatigue, constipation, IBS, diarrhea, numbness, tingling, neuropathy, and asthma. That's just a short list. If you go to the doctor with any of those, what are they going to give you? A pill, right? If that pill doesn't work, what do they give you then? Another pill or a combo of pills, and now you've got diarrhea from all the pills, so you get another pill. So it's just a common system. So, real quick, I want to talk about my. That's fine. Keep it back there. This is my family. So we went through. With my wife, we tried everything. Like, we tried what I was doing in the office wasn't working, so we had to change the chiropractic side of what we were doing. We changed our diet. We got our exercising. We did biofeedback and therapy, and we kind of tried it all until we kind of figured out. She has a condition called POTS. You ever heard of that? POTS, stands for sucks. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. But after about 2.5 years, she started to get a little better. And then she got a little better. And then she got a thing called momentum. That's what most people need, is just a little bitty thing called momentum. You need a little bit of a win, and then another win, and then you start to realize that I don't have to be so fearful of X, Y, and Z, and my body can actually heal, and I'm sleeping better, and I have more energy. So she finally got that, and then little man came along 2 years ago in February. Her birthday's the 24th, his is the 27th, and hers is the 28th of February. Pray for me. Valentine's is right there too, so you can donate in January. We'll fund that. But that's my big why. That's why I work out. That's why every morning, I work out every morning. 7 days a week, don't miss a day. I probably missed 2 days in 3 or 4 years. The reason I do that is not because I'm motivated. I am not, I was telling Monty earlier, I'm motivated maybe 1 day a week, maybe 2. I hate it. I don't want to do it. I drag my butt down there. I lay down on that foam roll, and I do my foam rolling while I'm drinking my coffee, and then I get to going on my workout. I do it because it's a thing called discipline. It's not motivation, it's discipline. It's what we do. Discipline is there when motivation just is gone, when it's fleeting. So we have to start getting disciplined. If this matters to you, if your family matters to you, and your health and your future matters to you, then we have to start enacting some discipline. And it's way easier and way more rewarding than you could ever imagine. So in our office, we treat a tremendous amount of conditions now. So we've changed our whole practice. In the last 1.5 to 2 years, we've completely revamped everything we've done. We've made tons of investments in staff and new equipment and new procedures and training and seminars and all this other stuff so that we can treat metabolic conditions and gut health and more complicated cases. So headaches, migraine, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, high blood pressure, allergies, degeneration, true preventative medicine. That's what my goal is to do, is to create a one-stop shop where people can actually truly get healthy and not just mitigate their symptoms. And I love chiropractic. It's what I do, and it bleeds from who I am, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. And if you're coming in, fantastic. I love that you're here, but where's the next level we can take your health to? That's the question. So we have new services. Comprehensive lab and blood work. I have a nurse practitioner that now works almost every Wednesday. Most Wednesdays she's in, so we can schedule you with her to get labs done, hormones, which we'll talk about, men's and women's hormonal health, gut repair and detox solutions. We have a product called from Apex Laboratories that actually helps to seal that leaky gut, that screen door we talked about where the kid threw the baseball. We can actually seal the leaky gut so it turns off the immune system and cranks down the inflammation. Because you can eat all the broccoli you want, and you can do all the exercise you want, but if your gut is still leaky, you're not going to get as healthy as you want to be. That's the missing piece for a lot of people. Functional medicine with autoimmune protocols, arthritis and joint pain for hips, knees, and shoulders. Regenerative medicine, I'm super excited about this. So we started offering stem cells. Anybody pro-life in this room? Yep, me too. So it's not from aborted fetal cells. They take mothers who've been screened thoroughly, who are healthy on the front end, and they take umbilical cells from a scheduled C-section that they would normally just discard anyway, and they harvest those brand new mesenchymal stem cells that are like beautiful, wonderful, little golden, powerful. Anyone ever heard of stem cells before? Like normally what they'll do is they'll draw them from you. Like they'll take your 35-year-old stem cells and they'll use those, and these are 4 hours old. Like they're brand new. They've not become anything yet. They're super powerful. And then they inject that into the joint, or I'm going to get an IV of it here in, I think, 2 weeks. And that can go systemically. Crosses the blood-brain barrier, can affect the thyroid and the kidneys and the liver and the spleen, everything. I actually had it done in my knee back in September. So in September of last year, I had the stem cells with the PRP. I couldn't play basketball. I couldn't jog. When I would adjust you guys, I couldn't really kneel on that knee. Like it was a weird position for me. And now, minus this foot thing, I can play basketball twice a week.
What is PRP?
Platelet-rich plasma. So we normally use that as a booster. So we put that with the stem cell, and then our nurse practitioner can inject it into the joint, shoulders, knees, hips. And hips, they use ultrasound to guide it. And I actually had it in my shoulder in January, and I couldn't get my shoulder down from the armrest without like wincing. And now it's probably 90-ish% better. And I do the rehab, and I do everything else, but like it's giving me life gives you life. So you're not just injecting cortisone or blasting the joint with all this toxic anti-inflammatory, cartilage rotting nastiness that most people get.
I have a question on that. Can the stem cell therapy help create an insulin cell for diabetes?
You mean if it's done through IV? So the theory, we don't know. There's no way to predict like what the outcomes are going to be. All we know is that you inject the firemen and they go find the fire. Wherever the damage is, wherever the inflammatory process is, they find the damage and start to get to work to produce a pancreatic cell or a tendon cell or a muscle cell or a bone cell or kind of whatever your body needs. So it's one of those with that kind of therapy, you won't know until you try. But most people, like if you've heard of people that do this kind of therapy with the mesenchymal stem cells, they have to go to Panama or Costa Rica, or they have to go overseas because it's not FDA approved. The Food and Drug Administration, for some reason, doesn't like anything competing with their drugs. Cosmetic, PRP, Botox, dermaplaning. I might take the plunge and do Botox. I've always been against that, but my wife said, it's time. So I may be the monkey that can do that. But the nurse practitioner we have, she does that all the time. Class 4 laser therapy, which is great for joint issues and back pain, hip pain, shoulder pain, but it's a class 4 medical laser which basically converts an enzyme within the mitochondria to produce more ATP or energy. So it skyrockets the healing effect in the body. I had a thing in my hip where every time I drove, my leg would just kill me. I did that laser 3 times, and it's been gone for a year and a half. So that's anecdotal, I know, but we have people, a lot of you guys have probably used the laser too. And then pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, or PEMF. That's an electromagnet that gets pulsed through the body to speed up the healing process. I'm trying to short on time. Decompression therapy, inflammation, metabolic health, and weight loss. So take out that last sheet. That should be the last sheet that you have, or maybe it's the top sheet. Healthy to 100. This guy right here. So what we're going to do, and we're opening up some times over the next few weeks where we're going to do, if you check what you're interested in, then I will meet with you one-on-one. We'll do about a 15-minute kind of consultation to get an idea of what you want, what your options are. There's no charge for that. I'm not charging, but we got to schedule it effectively. But you circle what you want to do, and then we'll talk and meet one-on-one about how we can move forward with any of these services that you're interested in. So take that, and then the ladies are going to, you hand that in to those 2 beautiful ladies in the back, not Dr. Brock. That's it, guys. I want to pray for the, you can clap, Carol. Go for it. Thank you. I want to stop you from clapping. But I like to pray for the food. The food's coming out, and then I'm going to get out of here and get with my little man. So